Chapter 770. Yesterday there were many brothers and sisters who stayed up all night with me. There was a kind of strength in my heart. At 9 in the morning I really couldn't stay up and went to sleep. In the end I slept until 5 or 6 in the afternoon. At this moment I sincerely offer up the last chapter of the Qing Yu year. There are 11,000 words in total. It is not charged and is free because I want to share this last feeling with everyone. The epilogue will also follow. It will probably be within 2 days. Licking my lips, it is truly indescribably moving. A long time later in the spring. In the beautiful city of Hangzhou, a young man was riding on a big green horse. Behind him were many servants and guards, and the formation was quite grand. The young man walked along the weeping willow bank of West Lake. Occasionally, he would raise his hand to push aside the willow branches in front of him. There was a smile on his face, but he did not pretend to be at ease. On the contrary, he exuded a sense of scholarly nobility and an indescribable sense of freedom. Occasionally, pleasure boats passed by on the lake, but there were no beautiful women waving their red sleeves like in the rumors. Beside the young man, a person who looked like a housekeeper laughed in a high voice and said, "Everyone says that there are many beauties in West Lake. How come I don't see any?" The young man on the green horse furrowed his brows slightly. He probably felt that the housekeeper's words were too beneath his status. On another horse, a person who looked like an ace coldly said, "Baoyue brothel has opened all over the world, but there are people who fish in West Lake every day. Who would dare to make a living in West Lake?" These words were spoken somewhat strangely and carried a glimmer of coldness that could not be suppressed. The Qing kingdom was still the most powerful country in the world. Although the Overwatch Council in Jingdo had been reformed and even the position of director had been removed, the emperor's supervision of officials had reached an unprecedentedly strict level. Relying on the abundance of the national treasury and the methods of a certain predecessor, he had greatly increased the salaries of officials. Although the matter of running amok in the countryside could not be completely stopped, in a place as romantic as Hangzhou, would anyone dare to take over all of West Lake? The young man on the green horse furrowed his brows slightly and looked at the commoners in the distance moving out of their way. He paid attention to their clothing and expressions and turned his attention elsewhere. A few years ago the Qing emperor was on an expedition to the north. Unexpectedly, just as war was about to break out, a startling change happened in the royal palace in Jingdo. The Qing rebel Fan Xian entered the palace to assassinate the emperor. Unfortunately, the emperor died. Once this news came out, the world was shocked. The country was thrown into turmoil. The Qing Iron Riders, who had already attacked the walls of Nanjing, had no choice but to retreat. They let go of the delicacy they had already swallowed. However, they still occupied a large piece of northern Qi territory. The matter of the Qing kingdom's northern expedition was delayed. After the new emperor cleaned up the court, cultivated trusted aides, and regained the confidence of the Qing people, the northern expedition was still not brought to the table. It felt like it would drag on forever. However, northern Qi did not let down its guard because of the unrest in the south. Under the careful governance of the Zhan family emperor, the northern Qi kingdom prospered and prospered. The strength of the country was gradually recovering. If this stalemate continued, the Qing kingdom's next northern expedition would probably become particularly difficult. Everyone who knew about the details of the assassination that shocked the entire world, including the Qing court, kept it a secret. They only used the fastest speed to nail Fan Xian to the pillar of shame. No one had any doubts about this. After all, the present emperor was the emperor's own son. Although everyone knew that the emperor and Fan Xian had a brotherly and teacher-student relationship, it was impossible for him to let go of the hatred of his father's death. What everyone found strange was why the Qing court did not tie this shocking matter to northern Qi or Dongyi. Instead, they used the anger of the nation to directly carry out the northern expedition to the end. Instead, whether intentionally or not, they removed northern Qi and Dongyi from this matter. No one knew that the young man on the green horse was the present emperor of the Qing kingdom. Naturally, no one recognized that the ace accompanying him was the foremost ace of the Qing kingdom, the deputy of the Bureau of Military Affairs, Yi Wan. If the northern Qi learned of this news and knew that the Qing emperor and Yi Wan had appeared at the same time in Hangzhou, far from Jingdo, they would probably send out a large number of assassins to try their luck. After all, if the Qing emperor and Yi Wan died at the same time, the Qing kingdom's strength would probably be halved. The present Qing emperor was the third prince, Li Qingping, born of the previous emperor and imperial consort Yi. Since he dared to leave Jingdo and come to Hangzhou for a walk in the spring, he was not worried about these safety issues. Yi Wan beside him was a rare 9th-level ace. No one knew how many palace aces were hidden around him. Most importantly, Li Qingping did not believe there was anyone in this world who could harm him by the side of West Lake. A dozen years ago, in the 6th year of the Qing calendar, I stayed in Jiangnan for an entire year. Li Qingping sat on the green horse and gazed at the gentle ripples on the surface of West Lake. His gaze also became gentle. Although I stayed in Suzhou's Hua Garden for a long time, I also lived in the manor by West Lake for a while. Thinking about it now, it was the most relaxed days of my life. Your Majesty shoulders the peace of the world and the hopes of tens of thousands of people. Naturally, you cannot be as relaxed and happy as you were in your youth, Yi Wan said without much emotion. The two of them were by the willow bank of West Lake. Around them were people from the palace. Passers-by all stayed far away, so there was no need to avoid the conversation between ruler and official. Li Qingping listened to Yi Wan's old-fashioned, arrogant and hidden words of advice. He smiled slightly and did not reveal any feelings of loathing. First, he respected Yi Wan's loyalty to him. Second, Yi Wan had once been his martial tutor. Even now, Li Qingping only saw the man he had not seen for a long time as his only teacher. A group of people slowly advanced along the beautiful willow bank of West Lake toward the mountain, breaking the peace that had been maintained for many days. They came to an elegant courtyard with gray walls and black eaves. I haven't been here for many years, but this courtyard hasn't changed much. Li Qingping dismounted his horse with a calm expression. The door to the courtyard had long been opened, ready to welcome the emperor's incognito arrival. Standing in front of the courtyard with the door wide open that still had an impression of, the Qing emperor tidied his clothes and stepped in. The courtyard beside West Lake faced the water and had its back to the mountain. The back was quiet and secluded, but it did not have much of the dampness of the mountain. The lake water and the gentle wind passed through the forest and into the courtyard, making the voice in the study at the back of the courtyard become very gentle. Sir, I have completely lost your secret support these years. Sir, there is something I do not understand. Sir. The person called Sir by the Qing emperor was silent for a long time and still didn't speak. It was not until a long time later that the voice rang out quietly, "Since your Majesty has come, then rest a bit more at West Lake. The scenery in Jiangnan is good and the weather is good. It is better than Jingdo's hot summers and cold winters." Li Qingping's voice was also silent for a long time. It carried a slight hidden bitterness. Slowly he said, "Sir, in the end I am the son of a country. Your Majesty, I am well aware of this matter. However, I have long ceased to be an official of the Qing kingdom, am I not? Sir, regarding the matter of the palace treasury, you still have to give the court an explanation. Now that the Overwatch Council has found the whereabouts of that village, as the emperor, I cannot pretend to be deaf and mute. Your Majesty, if there is any official who is angry about this matter, there is no harm in having them come find me. I don't mind letting them know exactly what this palace treasury is." The conversation stopped here and reached an impasse. The side of the study facing the courtyard had an open window pierced through by glass. Fan Xian sat beside the bright table under the window and moved his gaze away from Li Qingping's face. Narrowing his eyes slightly, he looked toward the peach blossom tree in the courtyard. A number of years had already passed. He had also disappeared from the world for a number of years. He had even disappeared from the discussions in the tea shops and alleys. Without a doubt, many people had already forgotten the Qing kingdom's immortal poet, powerful official and final rebel. His appearance had not changed much. A number of years was not enough to add the color of wind and frost to his brows and hair. It was still the same as before. However, his expression was increasingly calm and unruffled, calm and unmoving. Li Qingping glanced at him and slowly raised the teacup in his hand. Taking a shallow sip, he did not purposely hide the worry between his brows. Yi Wan, who had been standing by his side the entire time, narrowed his eyes and looked at the person who looked like Tian Jiaoweng. His brows gradually furrowed. It had been many years since he had seen this person. Although he secretly knew that this person was living comfortably in the world, Yi Wan was still unable to accept this reality. A rebel who tried to assassinate the previous emperor was actually able to live a peaceful life in the Qing kingdom. This absurd reality made it difficult for Yi Wan to suppress the anger in his heart. However, he knew that now was not the time to flare up. He still couldn't resist slowly saying in an icy voice, "Sir Fan Jr. in front of the emperor, it is best to abide by your duty as an official." Fan Xian turned his head and smiled. He didn't say anything. He knew Yi Wan's personality and his present position in the court. He also knew why Yi Wan had such deep enmity toward him. Duty as an official? If he had truly thought of himself as an official of the Qing kingdom, the things in the palace would not have happened in the past. It was not only Yi Wan who wanted to eat Fan Xian's flesh and sleep with his skin. Most of the loyal officials in the Qing court felt a powerful hatred toward the already disappeared Sir Fan Jr. In order to quell this hatred, the Qing court had long beaten the Fan clan into the dust. All of the Fan clan's property had been confiscated. It was not brought into the national treasury. It was handed to King Jing's manor to manage. Because the emperor's mother came from Duke Lu's manor, the duke's ally was not implicated by Fan Xian. Furthermore, most of the Fan clan had long left Jingdo. Their property had been confiscated, but it had been handed to King Jing's manor. This could shut the mouths of most of the officials, but how could it truly harm Fan Xian? Fan Xian smiled calmly, warmly, and sincerely at Li Qingping and said, "It's been many years since I've seen your majesty. Although court matters are troublesome, it's best if you stay for a few more days." He completely ignored Yuan. This was a kind of self-restraint, coldness, and confidence. Li Qingping smiled slightly and said, "That's fine. It's been a long time since I've seen Sister Chen and that pair of clowns." Fan Xian also smiled and said, "Shunning and Liang are probably practicing calligraphy with Cece right now. Your Majesty, go first. I'll come after changing." He smiled bitterly. "Nowadays I sleep every day and wake up late. I have truly neglected them." The emperor of the Qing kingdom, Li Qingping, and the famous general of the Qing army, Yuan, walked out of the study like two normal guests. Fan Xian did not personally accompany them. This kind of treatment and situation was truly difficult to understand. However, Li Qingping and Yi Wan maintained their silence and did not show any anger. The conversation in the study earlier had completely expressed Fan Xian's attitude. The housekeeper of the West Lake Fan Manor humbly led the way in front. The housekeeper's appearance was delicate and pretty. At first glance, one would feel a sense of closeness to him. However, there were still a few acne scars on his face. It was a bit of a pity. Washed away by the warm and peaceful smile on his face, not many people would notice this. Walking along the quiet and beautiful stone path in the manor, Li Qingping looked at the back of the housekeeper in front of him and suddenly furrowed his brows slightly. He felt that the figure was familiar, particularly the way this person responded earlier. It had the deep style of a court. It made the Qing emperor think of an unimportant figure. "Hongzhu." Li Qingping furrowed his brows slightly and called out probingly. "Yes, your majesty." The Fan Manor housekeeper's body froze slightly. He immediately turned around and bowed respectfully. Li Qingping looked at him with a strange gaze. After a long time, he faintly opened his mouth and said, "When Sir left Jingdo, he only asked me for you. I never understood. Unexpectedly, you were able to stay by his side the entire time." Countless thoughts surged through the emperor's heart. In the Fan Manor he didn't say much. He only waved his hand and had Hongzhu lead him to the side yard. I am the dividing line at the end of the chapter. The Qing emperor, who was patrolling incognito, did not stay by West Lake for long. After 3 days and 2 more fruitless conversations with Fan Xian, Emperor Li Qingping and Yi Wan left the Fan Manor by West Lake and headed in the direction of Suzhou. In the entire Qing court, only a few important figures at the very top knew that Fan Xian was now living in seclusion by West Lake. Shui Qing, who was still the governor of Jiangnan Road, also knew. After Li Qingping ascended to the throne, he had rotated the governors of the 7 roads under heaven. However, he had never touched Jiangnan Road. One reason was because Jiangnan Road was of utmost importance to the Qing kingdom. The other reason might be that he had the thought of using Shui Qing, a powerful figure, to check and balance Fan Xian, who was living in seclusion. Amidst the sound of horse hooves, Li Qingping's expression was calm. After a long silence, he suddenly said, "When Sir took Hongzhu from the palace, I thought it was as the rumors said, that Hongzhu was the head eunuch that Sir hated the most. I couldn't bear to see him. Now I find that Hongzhu is actually one of his people." Li Qingping's brows furrowed slightly. He also changed the way he addressed Fan Xian from Sir to Sir. Presumably, the exposure of Hongzhu's identity had made the most powerful ruler in the world feel a faint sense of unease and anger. Who would have thought that he had hidden so many people in the palace? No wonder he could enter and leave the palace unhindered. Nothing in the palace could be hidden from him. In the end, even father lost to him. Yuan was silent to the side. He hoped that the emperor could order the court to carry out the most thorough attack against Fan Xian's faction hidden in the darkness. However, the changes in the situation these few years made Yuan clearly feel what kind of influence Sir Fan Jr., who was nominally living in seclusion, had on the Qing kingdom and the entire world. It was basically impossible to purge him in such a situation. Li Qingping, sitting on the green horse, suddenly sighed and said, "I know what you want to say. There's no need to say it. I have studied with Sir since I was young and know what kind of person he is. Mother will not allow me to have other thoughts. He turned his head and glanced at Yuan. He thought to himself that in the court, there was probably only this loyal official who had the most ability to assist him. As for Sir, how could he come to assist him? He could only pray that he didn't make any more big trouble. Was there some dissatisfaction? Fortunately, Li Qingping had sat on the throne for a long time, but deep in his heart, there was still the fear, gratitude and worship from his youth toward Fan Xian. These emotions were complicated, so his gaze was also complicated. Through the green trees by the side of the road, he looked at the beautiful spring scenery in the southeast. Faintly he said, "Without Sir, it would be impossible for me to sit on this chair." Other than the scholars and officials in the court, who still retained a powerful murderous intent toward Fan Xian's name, the common people under heaven did not have much anger toward Fan Xian. The things that benefited the people, the legs of the stools and the halls, all had a large hang carved into them. Life by the West Lake was very comfortable. Fan Xian had already lived a number of peaceful years. However, the peace of this spring had been disturbed by the emperor's sudden visit. His heart seemed to have left the realm of tranquility. On the morning after Li Qingping left, he began to stroll through the garden with fresh dew on his head. A pair of children had already grown up and had long begun to learn. Now they were working hard with Cici to practice calligraphy every day. Back in Danzhou, Cici had helped Fan Xian copy out a great deal of the story of the stone. Her small regular script was beautiful. Fan Xian was not worried. He only felt a bit of heartache that the children had to wake up so early. Lin Wanner walked up from behind him and took out an unlined robe to drape over his body. "Be careful not to catch a cold. How long did you play mahjong last night?" Fan Xian glanced at her mischievously and asked teasingly. Presently, Cici still had to be responsible for the children's studies. Other than occasionally looking at the accounts of the Hangzhou conference, Lin Wanner had nothing else to do. Thus, she threw her limited life into the limitless work of building up the city wall and enjoyed it tirelessly. The people in the family aren't good enough. After a few rounds they scattered, Lin Wanner replied with a smile. She looked like a young married woman in her 20s, but her smile was still as bright and gentle as before. Her large eyes were still untainted by the dust of the world. "When the second prince comes back, let's see how he'll sort you out," Fan Xian said with a smile. "Speaking of Xia, Yu Chang came yesterday with a message from father. At the time the emperor was talking to you. I was afraid that these matters were important, so I didn't disturb you." Yu Chang was the black-clothed tiger guard. He had followed the retired Minister of Revenue, Fan Jian, for many years. He was the Fan clan's most trustworthy aide. Hearing these words, Fan Xian furrowed his brows slightly and asked, "What is the matter with father?" "Nothing important. He just wants us to go back to Danzhou in a while. Grandmother misses you. Xia also has to rush back from Shangjing. I'm afraid he won't be able to come to Hangzhou in time," Lin Wanner replied quietly. Fan Xian said, "Then let's go back." Xia. For some reason, he sighed and smiled at Wanner. "At the beginning I thought things very well. I thought that once the third prince became emperor, Xia would be able to return to the capital. Perhaps he would become the Minister of Revenue in the future and help the third prince. However, he is now my brother. I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to appear in Jingdou for the rest of his life. Don't worry about that for now." However, Yu Chang asked on behalf of father, "How exactly are we going to handle 10 Family Village?" "Follow the plan and take it slow." Fan Xian's smile gradually faded. Calmly and solemnly he said, "Since the court already knows, then there is no need to hide it so much. The third prince's words are still as insincere as when he was young. He is clearly worried to death, yet he refuses to make things clear. Since it is so, it is not good for me to say too much. Speaking of the emperor, your attitude toward him these 2 days is truly problematic. Didn't you notice Yiwan's dark face?" Lin Wanner said with a smile. "Although your relationship with him is not like that of a normal ruler and official, he is, after all, the emperor. At least on the surface you have to do it." Fan Xian laughed and patted Wanner's head. After a moment of silence he said seriously, "I've spent half my life to reach the point where I don't kneel to others. I can't make an exception for him." In the present world, regardless of whether it was the emperor of northern Qi or the emperor of the Qing kingdom, Fan Xian did not need to kneel in front of them. If he knelt, these two emperors would probably sink into suspicious emotions. The third prince has grown up. He should have his own thoughts. The couple walked into the depths of the bamboo forest and headed toward the white stone protrusion in the distance. As they walked, Fan Xian spoke. A complicated smile rose involuntarily to the corners of his lips. Last year he chased old Dai out of the palace. It was all because of me that old Dai kept his life. It could be said that the third prince gave me some face. Ho Jichang has also been used by him. Fan Xian passed through the bamboo forest and stood in front of the white stone protrusion. Calmly he said, "That won't do." Although his words were simple, they revealed a glimmer of unquestionable power. Lin Wana looked at the side of his face in a daze. She did not think that her husband's words about interfering with court politics were that unbelievable. In the years after the Qing Emperor's death, the power related to Fan Xian seemed to have been completely confiscated and scattered by the court. However, those who truly understood the inside story knew that if Fan Xian wanted to, he could still use a powerful power. Although Lao Wang has retired, Ziyu is still working in the capital. I'll leave this matter to him. Haven't you never wanted to interfere with the Jingdo court? Why are you doing this time? Aren't you worried about angering the emperor? This matter involves Jichang. This is the emperor trying to anger me. As for the matters of the court, I have no right to interfere. However, if he is trying to test my bottom line step by step, I don't mind pushing my bottom line a bit further forward. Fan Xian looked at his wife and said, I understand the third prince better than you. None of the Li children are simple. After saying this, he turned his head and looked calmly at the white stone protrusion. In reality it was a grave. Qin Pingping's grave had been set by the side of the beautiful West Lake. After the Qing Emperor, there was no one else in the world who could contend with Fan Xian. Li Qingping could not either. Fan Xian's power was too vast and scattered throughout the world. Even the incomparably powerful Qing Emperor had his hands and feet bound by Fan Xian and could only fight a two-person battle, much less the present Li Qingping. Fan Xian had the greatest money house in the world in his hands and the loyalty of the remaining 8 ninth-level aces of the Sword Hut. He still had countless spies and trusted aides in the palace treasury. The Ming family Xia Qifei controlled was still the largest royal merchant in the Qing kingdom. Fan Xija's business in northern Qi was still the largest supplier of palace treasury smuggling. The little princess in the northern Qi royal palace was his own daughter. Lady Ning, who had been under house arrest in the palace, had been brought to Dongyi a few years ago. Going with her was the great Wang Fei Masoasua, and the young lady of Governor Wang's family Wang Tong'er. The year before last, the great prince had returned to the capital to see the emperor. Everything was as usual. The present Dongyi belonged to the Qing kingdom in name. In reality, it was still an independent kingdom ruled by the great prince and Fan Xian. Wang Tong'er had followed Prince Heching's manor and moved to Dongyi. Wang Jikuan could no longer continue in the position of Yanjing governor. After Commander Yi Wan had been stabbed by the shadow and grieved over the emperor's death and the chaos in the Qing kingdom, he barely managed to maintain order in court for a while before bidding farewell and leaving. Following the retirement of these two elders, the Qing military began a process of renewal. Yi Wan formally stood on the stage in Jingdo beside the emperor's dragon robe. However, this process of renewal could not be completed in a short period of time. Other than these reasons, the most important reason Fan Xian was able to have a position equal to, or even higher than, an emperor was his past history and the powerful martial support he possessed. The people close to Fan Xian had woven a large net under the heavens, one link after another. Regardless of who wanted to harm him or harm one of the links, they would probably welcome Fan Xian's attack. Everyone knew of Fan Xian's power and ruthlessness. Presently the world was very peaceful. Fan Xian looked calmly at Qin Pingping's grave and the white jade soaked in dew. He was silent. It had been a while since he had come to see the old cripple. If the third prince had not brought back some of his past memories, perhaps he would not have come today. Presently Fan Xian lived very well. His subordinates, family and friends also lived very well. Shi Chanli and Sang Wen were already married. The swordsman who had once taken a blow from Fan Xian in Baoyue brothel had disappeared. Living in this world, he seemed to be perfect and had nothing else to ask for. The more it was so, the more he felt that Qin Pingping was very lonely in the grave. Although the white jade outside completely covered up the dark shadow this old man was born with, it was unable to warm Fan Xian's heart a little. Qin Pingping's grave did not have a monument. There was only a poem carved into the stone wall beside it. On it was written, "A lone sail, a leaf in the Danzhou sky, only exists between teachers and friends. How can the country be the only family name important? Who in the universe will pity the tens of thousands of people hanging? A black rider soars into the sky for 3,000 li. A lonely garden with a head of white hair for 20 years. There is no saying that when autumn comes one's body grows old. I laugh at the heroes who are not idle." A book written by a book friend. I stole it but forgot the name of the original author. Please forgive me. I'm very sorry. Each time Fan Xian sensed his transcendence in this world and his peace after the emperor's death, he stopped to read this poem and would always think of many things from the past. In reality, the strike that truly destroyed the emperor was not the rainbow in the palace or his attack. Perhaps it was the endurance he had begun many years ago and the old cripple's betrayal in the end. It was this strike that finally caused the Qing emperor to open that ugly scar of many years. He walked down from the altar and became a mortal person. Only then did he give so many opportunities to those who came after him. Fan Xian was silent for a long time. He plucked a small yellow flower beside the bamboo forest and gently placed it on the grave. He then turned and left. Life at West Lake was leisurely and free. There was nothing worth writing about. The only thing that made Fan Xian unhappy was that for the sake of the people he had to take care of, he seemed to be unable to retreat and hide. Even if he wanted to travel overseas to find the true Western continent, it seemed that it would be impossible to realize in a short period of time. After all, if he were to leave this continent, who knew how many more disturbances this continent would create? This was not narcissism, nor was it arrogance. Instead, it was the legacy of the predecessors and the encounters in this life that created this incomparably brilliant yet incomparably helpless situation. In the many years at West Lake residence, the only small incident that had occurred was probably Fan Wujia's assassination attempt. This last remaining member of the second prince's 8 generals had endured for many years in order to avenge the second prince and his colleagues. In the end, he had even thrown himself under He Zhongwei's wing. Unexpectedly, he had still been captured by Fan Xian. The Overwatch Council did not kill this person. Instead, they followed Fan Xian's wishes and exiled him. Unexpectedly, this person had once again found an opportunity to assassinate by West Lake. Of course, Fan Xian did not die. He also did not kill him. Perhaps it was because he felt that life was too boring. Or perhaps it was because he respected this kind of stubbornness that he knew he could not do it but still did it. There were singers dancing. A clear and beautiful song echoed through West Lake Fan Garden. Fan Xian's family sat scattered in the garden eating fruits, chatting, watching the dance and listening to the song. The older singers in Qin Garden had been allowed to marry retired subordinates of the council. The ones left in Fan Garden were still about 16 years old. They were very young and inexperienced. They preferred to stay by West Lake to play. Seeing the inexperienced dancers, Fan Xian couldn't help but sigh in his heart at the old cripple's sharp eyes. When Qin Garden left the capital, these girls were probably only 10 years old. How could Qin Pingping see that they were destined to be outstanding beauties? The singer was Sang Wen's sister. This girl, who had sung for Qin Pingping for a long time, seemed to be in a bad mood. She was only willing to stay in Fan Garden and occasionally sing songs that shocked the flowers inside the moon. In the spring of the 4th year of the Qin calendar, Teng Zijing sat in front of the street and drew a few circles. He didn't say anything. His heart was miserable. He thought to himself, what kind of appearance did the young master of the Count's manor have? As the song began, Cece, who was sitting by Fan Xian's side, spat out a mouthful of tea. Lin Wan also couldn't resist laughing as she hit Fan Xian's shoulder. She thought to herself, in the entire garden, only he could write such an absurd phrase. Teng Zijing and his family, who were sitting by the side of the gate, looked at each other, particularly Teng Zijing, whose hair was gradually turning gray. He couldn't resist stroking his walking stick, thinking that the young master was too evil. When he went to Danzhou to pick up the person, how could he not be afraid? Who would have guessed that the handsome young man would end up like this? Fan Xian narrowed his eyes and examined Teng Zijing's awkward expression. His mood was very good. His pride gave birth to some happiness. He thought to himself, you are too immature. You refuse to become an official even if you are beaten to death and only want to stay in the manor. Otherwise, if you become a provincial official and I change the name of the province to Bailing, wouldn't that be perfect for a great work to come out? The Sang family girl seemed to not feel it and continued to sing seriously. It was as if she wanted to sing a certain person's comical life from beginning to end in a sentimental tone. It was near the end of spring. On the cliff outside Danzhou, Fan Xian held Shunning's soft and tender hand. Standing on the edge of the cliff, he looked at the familiar sea in front of him. Shunning gazed at her slightly worried father and said in a clear and childish voice, "Father, you don't seem to like Aunt Sang's song. Do you want Shunning to sing one for you?" "All right, let's sing Above the Rainbow." "I taught you," Shunning said with some difficulty. "But this kind of foreign language is very difficult to learn. Uncle has searched for a long time in Dongyi and still hasn't found a teacher." Fan Xian smiled and said, "Then I won't sing." He looked at his daughter beside him and for some reason, suddenly thought of the little girl in Danzhou many years ago. He also thought of the words the emperor had said before he died. He was silent and missed his sister, who he didn't know where. Don't always follow me. The frost-faced young lady of the Fan family was dressed as a doctor. She carried a medical box on her back and walked through a remote mountain. She looked at Li Hongqing, who looked like a vagabond, behind her and coldly said, "Rugia has already given birth to a second child. As an uncle you don't return to the manor. Besides, don't you know what King Jing is thinking?" Li Hongqing took off the straw hat on his head and fanned himself. Looking at Fan Roro by the tree, he smiled shamelessly and said, "If you want a child, go have it yourself. I don't have the time. How much longer are you going to follow me?" Fan Roro bit her lip and looked at him angrily. "I've already followed for 5 years. What's another 5 years?" Li Hongqing replied with a smile as he led the skinny horse that was even more tired than him. Fan Roro didn't say anything. She put down the gauze curtain under her straw hat and walked toward the mountain village where white smoke rose from the foot of the mountain. Occasionally she thought to herself that she was used to being followed by this bastard, so she might as well follow. Fan Xian's hand held shunning. His fingers touched a warm string of beads. Lowering his head to look, he realized it was the string of ruby beads that Haitang had given to her daughter many years ago. Seeing it, he thought of her. Fan Xian couldn't help but freeze for a moment. When will Auntie Duo come to see me again? Fan Shunning obviously had a more mature mind than her age. As soon as she saw her father's expression, she guessed what he was thinking and asked very considerately. Anyway, her two mothers were not around at this time, so no one would care. Fan Xian smiled and said, "When she's tired from the grasslands, she'll come to see you." Haitang had returned to the grasslands. No one knew when she would come back, but what about the Northern Qi Emperor and Sea Lily? What about the girl in the palace called Hong Dauphin? Rumor had it that next year Hong Dauphin would officially be made a princess. However, the Northern Qi Emperor had not had any children these years. There was some commotion in court. How exactly was the female emperor going to respond? Was she going to ask him to borrow a seed? Fan Xian would not mind this kind of sacrifice. Thinking of the scene in the sword hut and the carriage, his gaze became gentle. He said, "Shunning, do you want to go to Shangjing for a stroll? Then we'll go to the grasslands. When you're a bit older we'll go out to sea." "Sure," Shunning cried out excitedly. Fan Xian's gaze landed on the surface of the sea below the cliff. Suddenly he saw a ship heading toward the harbor. In front of the deck stood a person holding a green banner. Standing in the fierce sea wind, he looked confident and at ease. 13th Wang had come. Fan Xian's body froze slightly. His eyes were moist. Boundless gratitude rose in his heart. Since 13th Wang had returned from the north, Uncle Wu Zhu, who had been recuperating on Dong Mountain, should not be far from returning. Fan Xian truly missed that piece of black cloth. In order to hide the hot tears in his eyes in front of his daughter, Fan Xian turned his body and gazed at Danzhou on this side of the sea. He looked at the residences in the city and thought of the time he had once spent there. He then thought of his life after leaving Danzhou and couldn't help but be silent. In the distant Danzhou he saw a lot. Sister Dong was no longer selling tofu, but Brother Debao sat in front of the door and used his gaze to take advantage of the passing girls. The general store had been closed the entire time. There were no clothes hanging on the balcony facing the salty sea wind. No one shouted that it was going to rain because it was indeed not raining. Many people had left, but many people had stayed. Many things had changed, but even more things had not changed. Fan Xian sat down and held his daughter in his arms, gently rocking her. Shunning narrowed her eyes and looked at the foam on the sea and the gradually approaching ship. Suddenly she asked, "Father, just what kind of person was grandmother?" Fan Xian was startled and didn't react for a long time. In his heart, Yi Qingmei had always been an exceptionally intelligent and beautiful young girl who had walked out of a fairyland. The yellow clothing on the painting did not resemble the young Yi Qingmei. Yet, at this moment in his daughter's mouth, she was already his grandmother. She was the daughter of a little immortal who snuck off from heaven to play, Fan Xian said to his daughter. Fan Xian jokingly said to his daughter, "Later I got tired of playing and went back. I can't find her in the world anymore." Fan Shunning giggled and said, "Father, you're lying. Everyone says you're an immortal poet. If grandmother returned to heaven, why didn't you?" Fan Xian scratched his head and suddenly thought of the name the emperor had bestowed upon him many years ago. Smiling, he said, "Perhaps it's because many of my thoughts are different from hers. I am just a useless commoner. No matter what foreign land I go to, there won't be much of a difference. The sea breeze brushed against his face, dispersing the shy smile he was about to reveal. After a moment of silence, he quietly said, "My life is probably, since I am here, I will take things as they come." Father and daughter met each other's eyes and smiled. Facing the sea, the flowers bloomed in the warmth of spring. Chapter 771. Originally, I wanted to make the last chapter free, but I suddenly received a call at that time. In the end, I made a complete mistake. Not being able to make it free is my problem. More importantly, I even said that it would be free at the beginning. How embarrassing. I didn't expect that I would be so embarrassed on the last day. Everyone, please don't slap my face. Chapter 772. Please allow me to explain why the epilogue dragged on for so many days. It's not because I forgot to write it every night, but because my computer had a problem. 1 hour good but 1 day bad. For a computer idiot like me, this is one of the most frustrating things in the world. Fortunately, the problem occurred after the end. I warn everyone in advance, this epilogue perfectly fulfills my desire to be long-winded. The word count is more than 20,000, very long and boring. If you don't want to read it, you can close it at any time. Below is the main body of the epilogue. Please finish reading it at the end. Around 2006, I thought of a story. This story only had the beginning of an illegitimate child, and then I thought of the illegitimate child's father, but I didn't understand the illegitimate child's mother. At the beginning of the story, the illegitimate child's mother had a rather romantic life. When the illegitimate child was 4 years old, she died in a fire. She was a pitiful and respectable mother. But as a person from the same world, I felt injustice for the mother. I felt that this was wrong. Why should an outstanding woman suffer like that in a patriarchal society? So I changed the beginning of the story. At the very least, the mother had to have a good life first. After I finished writing Vermilion Bird, at the end of April 2007, when the flowers were really blooming, I began writing Qing Yu's Year. I started this epilogue this way not because I wanted to tell everyone that this story started with Yi Qing Mei, but because the first thing I thought about was the illegitimate child. This illegitimate child did not need to think about it. He naturally appeared and stood in front of me, ready to enter the story and act as the main character. Everything about Fan Xian and why I didn't particularly like him will be discussed later. At this time, I will first talk about the course of writing Qing Yu's Year in the past 2 years. 2 years was not a short period of time. It took up quite a lot of time in my life. For those of you who have been reading novels, you must have felt the same way. But I guess what everyone felt was that Qing Yu's Year was like a nanny who helped cook and wash clothes at home every day, and a rather beautiful one at that. Watching, chatting, and gossiping, naturally she could not reach out to do anything. However, when this little nanny broke the bowls or the washing machine and made us unhappy, we could scold her or teach her a lesson or two. Of course, most of the time we would still praise her for her neat work. I think it was because she was beautiful, just like how I liked the little nanny in Growing Pains. Spending time with everyone was the greatest use a novel could have. It was like a beautiful housekeeper. Just hanging around in front of everyone was quite good. After all, we didn't care about household chores, just like how we didn't need to care if there were any profound words in the Qing Yu Year, or if there were any reflections on life. Because there weren't any. I just wanted to write a story to pass time for everyone. After accompanying him for a long time, there would naturally be feelings. He started writing the story at the end of April 2007 and officially published it on Qidian on the 1st of May. Many things happened in the past 20 months. At this moment, I began to recall my memories. I can't forget fighting for monthly votes in the new book month because I've never been so nervous and tired in my life. Actually, now that I think about it, I didn't write much. Maybe it was just the pressure. A friend came from afar and accompanied me for a few days. Finally, I managed to save some manuscripts in the new book month. Oh my God, I saved manuscripts. What kind of abnormal achievement was this for me? The chapter of Romance of the Ages had its flaws, but I was too lazy to care. A novel might need to be logical and consistent, but I never thought that was the most important task. The most important task should be to make my friends who read the book happy, and to make my own writing happy. But to be honest, I didn't like the chapter one wrote. Again, I was under a lot of pressure at the time, but there were some sentences that I liked. From the first day I published the book, I told everyone that since I'm already in the novel, I should be more careful in certain aspects. In the first volume, I said that things like copying poems have always been seen as a great poison. But I always felt that if there were benefits, why wouldn't I want them? What's more, from the beginning of searching for Qingji, this hobby of mine has always been the same. The things I write are often praised or criticized as pretentious. But I don't copy poems, I don't use them to make a name for myself. I watch as my fame drifts away, but I suppress the itch in my heart, suppress the desire for vanity, suppress it to the point of vomiting blood, and wait for a few decades to bring the beautiful sentences that don't exist in this world to my grave. Isn't this what it means to be pretentious? When the poem was published, everyone's reaction was very strong. At least the monthly votes were very strong. The new book month won third place and I got an extra 6,000 yuan. This was the first time I got a monthly votes prize. It felt great. It seems that there are many people who share the same hobby as me. I'm very happy. After the new book month ended, I thought it would be much more relaxing. Anyway, I never thought of fighting for monthly votes. But who knew that at the beginning of July 2007, I had to go to Beijing to receive a certain award from Vermilion Bird magazine. At that time, I didn't have the money to buy a book, so I was free for a few days. Luckily, I had some manuscripts saved up, so I managed to get through those 2 days. The beauty with the rash helped me update. Beauties are always lazy, so she refused to help me come up with chapter titles. The friend who helped me save the manuscripts also went to Beijing, but this time she didn't write a single word because she was very busy in Beijing. She even met a few new friends in Xizhou. When I came back, I felt uneasy because I didn't have any manuscripts saved up. From then until now, I didn't have any manuscripts saved up for the rest of the year. I always write as I go because this is the true lazy me. The year 2007 after July was very stable. I wrote very steadily. Occasionally, I would write 3,000 words a day for 4 to 5 days. Of course, it was normal for me to write 7 to 9,000 words a day. Anyway, everyone wasn't in a hurry and I wasn't in a hurry either. As the story progressed, I wrote more when I was in a good state and I wrote less when I was in a bad state. Still the same word, lazy. But I didn't stop updating, which was very powerful. In December, I realized something, so I started to get monthly votes. First, I didn't want to waste the good intentions of those readers who voted for me every month. Second, I found that I was diligent enough and my writing wasn't bad. I could live up to their votes. Third, the most important thing was that I found that people were actually willing to help me get monthly votes. I could really squeeze into the top few and I could really earn a bonus. Who wouldn't do such a good thing? From then on, I threw myself into this magnificent cause, and I couldn't extricate myself. There was a small interlude. On the 14th of January 2008, due to the snowstorm on the flight from Guangzhou to Yichang, I had to take 2 free flights in the air, which delayed the update. This caused the first day of the Qingyu year to stop updating. It was very painful, just like my first night. I'm going down the wrong path. Forgive me, I'm really angry. That day. On that day, I found that I was very long-winded and flowy, just like in the Qingyu year. Everyone endured it and persevered until the end. There were many more and I had endured for the past 2 years. I didn't care about this epilogue. Anyway, this chapter didn't cost money, so I just needed to say a few more words. And I hope that I won't make a mistake like the previous chapter. I really can't afford to embarrass myself again because it won't be the first time, nor will it be the second time. Back to the topic, during the Spring Festival of 2008, I went back to my hometown and took 10 days off. It just so happened that I finished the Jiangnan chapter. It was normal that I didn't write because my cousin forgot to move the television over to his new house. I officially entered the year 2008. Everything was normal and everything was not normal. Because I started to get monthly votes, there was more pressure to write. The number was still not a lot, but my brain was exhausted. Fortunately, the monthly votes made it into the top 6 and top 3 and not just once. I was very proud. It was all thanks to everyone. In the 7th month of 2008, there was an annual meeting in Shanghai. Northeast leaders were interviewed. The updates were few and scattered. It was also a tense time for Dong Mountain. The book review and comments section was boiling with resentment. That month I didn't ask for monthly votes. Was it to make up for everyone's mental trauma? But what about me? Phew. I continued to write like this. I wrote mechanically. I wrote numbly. I wrote emotionally. I wrote with emotion. 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 I wrote with grief and indignation. Finally, I wrote until the 24th and 25th of this year. Almost 2 years of time was very long. Starting from Danzhou, there were 7 chapters in total. It was a lot. Such a large story with so many characters required more than 3 million words to describe. I was very proud that I had controlled this story. The problem was that this kind of control made me tired both physically and mentally. The problem was that this kind of control exhausted me physically and mentally. I was very tired. There were countless passages in the document, and there were countless useless ones. There were countless words to remind me of certain details that I hadn't forgotten, but there were still many that I had to throw away. Previously, at the end of the document, I was reading and deleting as I did so. I was a little reluctant to delete. Even I was surprised by my diligence. My teacher had once said that a good memory was not as good as a bad pen. It was true. I had done a lot of preparation work and memorized a lot of things. Although I might not be able to use all of them, I felt that my attitude was very powerful. Just as the Qing Emperor had said on Dong Mountain, I had never been so powerful in my life. I had originally thought that at this moment, I would feel like when I finished writing the Vermilion Bird story. There would be a wave of tiredness, confusion, emptiness, and confusion from the depths of my heart. However, at the end of the Qingyu year, other than a little tiredness, there were not many other emotions. On the contrary, there was a kind of calm joy. The review of my writing journey had come to an end. However, with so many words, it seemed that it did not fully reflect my hard work and contributions. I was a bit dissatisfied, but I didn't continue. Next, I would return to the Qingyu Year book as well as the people in the book that everyone has always remembered, as well as the feelings between these people, as well as my feelings toward them, you, and many other things. Where should I start? Let's start with the appearance of the character. I'll write about whoever comes to mind. If there are characters I don't remember, then forget it. The young patient lying in the hospital is called Fan Shen. He hasn't graduated from university yet. He says he is still a virgin, but he is about to die. Yes, this is the male lead of the Qingyu Year story. As for his previous life, I didn't describe too much. Even the position of chairman of the student council that I had planned out when I first designed the story was not pointed out in the end. The male lead's surname was Fan Xian, and his courtesy name was Nji. Since he had come, he should take things as they come. The last words he said in the Qingyu Year were actually the purpose of this book. This is Fan Xian's life. It is completely different from his mother's life. In my opinion, the previous life cannot affect the future. In a completely new world, one needs to live from the beginning. Since it is so, there is no need to touch too much on the matters of the previous life. The attitude of this life is actually the same as the attitude you and I have in this world. Humans cannot become philosophers or natural-born revolutionaries just because they have lived two lives. They are still insignificant and lowly, you and I, and do our best to live as ordinary and peaceful as possible. I have said before that I don't really like the character of Fan Xian, at least not the Fan Xian in front of the meadow, or perhaps compared to the other characters in the book. The reason for this is actually not complicated. If we tear off the clothes on Fan Xian's body and strip away the golden light brought by the transmigration of mother and son, the naked him is just a naked you and a naked me. Greedy for life, afraid of death, fond of ease, fond of leisure, fond of enjoyment, has a moral outlook formed after education, but when it comes to carrying it out, it is very vulgar, ambiguous, vain, used to pretending, fond of beauty, but unable to let go of his status, insisting that he is still a white-clothed CJ youth who believes in love. He wants to follow his brother's love, but he also doesn't want to lose his sister-in-law's love. He wants to take care of one without losing the other. In the end, he finds that he can't change anything, not even himself. He can only act according to the established guidelines and walk down a certain path. It can be said that this is moderate, gentle, and ordinary. On the Dragon Sky Forum, a forum member once said the words hometown wish. I think it is true. Hometown wish is the thief of virtue. However, the vast majority of people, including you and me, are like this, especially those of us who appear on the internet. Of course, if you are not the type of person I am referring to, please forgive me for being extreme. I don't like the attitude that I may sometimes display, it is not direct enough. I am too familiar with this kind of person. The people around me, including a certain part of myself, are actually very similar to Fan Xian, so I am unable to like Fan Xian too much. In the story of Qingyu's year, there were also a few idealists. In front of these idealists, no matter how beautiful Fan Xian was, no matter how he alternated between white and black, spat out poems, spat out a mouthful of blood, was supported by a servant girl to see the begonia flowers, and then flew in the wind to confidently fight the world, there was always a problem with his heart, and the light was slightly dim. I myself cannot be an idealist. I also feel that there is no major problem with Fan Xian's attitude towards life. In fact, it is the best attitude towards the people and things around him. However, I still respect idealists because I cannot do it myself, so it is difficult for me to respect Fan Xian. Fan Xian is only you and me. Just like the me who wrote this story and the you who read this story, if there really came a day when you were struck by lightning and transmigrated, if you had Fan Xian's good luck, the blessings of the predecessors, and the beautiful body, perhaps you would be another Fan Xian. Fortunately, Fan Xian improved in the end, which is gratifying. It is just that I wrote it rather stiffly. Such a story cannot give me too much time and the possibility of too many words to describe the true growth of the middle-aged Fan Xian. Speaking of this, I suddenly thought, Fan Xian really does look like a handsome middle-aged professor who has lost his hot-bloodedness a long time ago. I know a professor who is not bad when it comes to love. Whether or not Fan Xian's view of the world is correct does not need to be discussed, because he is not a saint who looks 500 years ahead and 500 years behind. But at least he has a relatively firm view of something, and that is not bad. It was not until the cave in Shi Mountain, in front of the dying Shaoan, that Fan Xian truly confirmed his sense of belonging to this world. This is something that Gidge Pig once mentioned, and I deeply agree with it. Fan Xian is not an indecisive person, but he wants to take care of everyone too much. It is like the feeling of smoothing things over. I mentioned this a little bit before, but I will not go into it here. His most admirable strength is probably his diligence, his hard work to survive, and his spirit of seeking a better life. This is probably the most common strength, but it is also the strength that is most worthy of applause. As for Fan Xian's love life, it is really a mess. This is mainly my fault because I was the one who wrote him. Based on my understanding of men who are creatures with the lower half of their bodies, once they are reincarnated into a society like the Kingdom of Qin, especially with Fan Xian's background, it is only logical that he would have a maid at 12, a maid at 13, and a maid at 14. Then he would go around the world, poor and virtuous, rich and have a large number of wives and concubines. It may not sound good to female readers, but it is true. A nicer phrase would be nothing more than saving the world's pitiful orphan girls, lingering around, spoiling others, constantly searching for a partner on the road of revolution, a partner whose outlook on life and the world can keep up with his footsteps. So it is my fault. I clearly know that I love beautiful women, but I still believe in this thing called love. So I arranged for Fan Xian to enter the temple of Qing and see his fiancée nibbling on a drumstick. I wrote it very happily. How could I let go of a woman like Lin Wanner? How could I not be moved by this kind of love story? I thought of Zhang Mingming's song. It is my fault again. I also like the new and never get tired of the old. In an evil society where men are allowed to have a few women, I can't help but let Fan Xian meet a different kind of woman, a woman who revisits the past, and every one of them is very happy, because things that cannot be done in reality are put into novels. This is the true meaning of fantasy, and I am no exception. Either it is more straightforward, like that old hoodlum Duan Jingchun, or it is to see men as a gelding, proudly standing among the grassland horses, only lowering his head to rub against the ones beside him. Fan Xian wants both. As the saying goes, in the later years of a hoodlum, he will also shed tears when reading love letters. Fan Xian's attitude towards love is slightly better than Zhang Wuji's, and much better than a man with 3 bad habits. He probably won't hate me too much. Let's talk about Fan Xian's feelings towards men. Please note there is no gay burning factor here, just a few words. From the wedge, it can be clearly seen that he is a person without parents, so he has some hidden Oedipus complex. So even if Yi Qingmei is not much older than him, even if the emperor does not seem to be a good father, even if Fan Jian has nothing to do with him, even if Qin Pingping can never have a son, even if Wu Zhu is about the same age as Qin Pingping, but as he tosses and turns, Fan Xian's feelings towards these men have finally been born. Because we are all very practical people, if someone is good to you, you will naturally be good to them, remember they're good, and thus develop feelings. Of the men mentioned above, apart from the really ugly teacher Fei Ti, they all treated Fan Xian very well. Some people might say what the Qing emperor did to the newly born Xian Xian and so on. Thinking about it from a different perspective, the feelings between men need time to develop. The Qing emperor had once told Fan Xian in the little building that when Fan Xian was in Danzhou, the Qing emperor often heard news of him, either through Qin Pingping or Fan Jian. A person like Fan Xian who knows how to pretend to smile shyly, is easy to like. After seeing more, hearing more, and knowing more, he will develop feelings. Perhaps one could make a horizontal comparison. Everyone would find that the Qing emperor's trust and love for Fan Xian was truly not something his sons could compare to. For one, it was because Fan Xian really knew how to pretend. From before the Hanging Temple, he had truly tricked the great emperor. For another, it was probably because the Qing emperor felt guilty and had thoughts of shifting his affection, so the Qing emperor treated Fan Xian very well. Naturally, this was for the Qing emperor, who was an evil gathering of royal power. It was not to be compared to a normal father. Fan Xian's feelings for Yi Qingmei were rather complicated. This was not clear. The book said a lot of superficial things, so I won't go into specifics. What else was there to say about Fan Xian? It seemed that there was none. All right, about his abilities. His abilities are actually quite good. After all, he is the male lead. Wu Zhu, the cute bamboo doll, the cold bamboo commander, the forever black-masked youth, and the rainbow in his heart that no one knows about. There is nothing much to say about Wu Zhu because I like him very much. If I praise Wu Zhu too much, I will go to hell. If I cover my face and say, the reason Wu Zhu is called Wu Zhu is because of the pronunciation of Yuzu. If you know, then you know. If you don't know, then let the shameless me go. I just want to talk about the matter of Wu Zhu and Yi Qingmei. The rainbow in his heart, enshrouded in thousands of years of ice and snow, burst forth from the little girl who to this day had appeared in the temple for some unknown reason. Yi Qingmei had allowed a fresh soul to be born into this world. What was Wu Zhu's feeling toward Yi Qingmei? To borrow from the comment of a great book friend, it was, without question, Wu Zhu has the least affection for Xiao Yezi. To her, he only has cold metal promises. However, Wu Zhu also has the most affection for Xiao Yezi. She is his world. Alright, Wu Zhu stopped here because he had never said much. Presently, he was on Dong Mountain recovering from his injuries. He didn't know if the materials 13th Wang went to the temple to steal would be enough for him to live for another 500 years. Chen Pingping was the third character to appear in the wedge. From then on, everyone should know his importance. This eunuch Chen Wuchang who liked to stick a fake beard under his chin, this cripple who had been in a wheelchair for half his life, this skinny old man who was afraid of the cold and liked to cover his knees with wool blankets, and this director of the Overwatch Council who liked to cover the windows of his Overwatch Council room with a piece of black cloth. I couldn't say much about Chen Pingping because I also liked him. Of the male characters in the book, I liked him and Wu Zhu the most because they were very manly. My heart yearned for them, Chen Pingping's name should have been changed later by Yi Qingmei. In reality, it was printed with Chen Pingping, the awesome person. When I read the records of the Grand Historian, I felt that Chen Pingping was too awesome. What? No one knew exactly why he was so awesome. Even Tai Shigong didn't know and couldn't say for sure. There was a time when Chen Pingping, who liked to joke around, was also very awesome. There was no need to mention his past achievements. I liked the image of this old cripple the most. He was a little yellow flower, a wheelchair, and a pure heart under the skin of an old orange. Chen Pingping was an idealist. Although his ideals were a bit vague, there was a good saying that it was not difficult to do one good deed. What was difficult was to do good deeds for a lifetime. It was not difficult for Chen Pingping to make a conspiracy. What was difficult was to make a conspiracy for a lifetime and still live for the brightest thing in his heart. What was it that shone in Chen Pingping's heart? It was not the conflict of ideas, nor was it the peace and happiness of the common people. It was definitely not the prosperity of the Qing dynasty. It was the promise of the past. He remembered someone's good deeds. He was more disdainful of being a slave than Fan Xian, a modern man. He firmly guarded that woman's shining ideals. Guarding someone else's ideals for a lifetime was idealism. I didn't have any regrets about the description of Chen Pingping in the book because it was written with great care. It had reached the limit of my ability. I felt that I had not let Chen Pingping down. From the beginning, I had set up his ending. I didn't have any sudden thoughts. I only respected him and fulfilled his wishes. The two guns in the black wheelchair were because I had seen a movie called Lone Wolf when I was young. The wheelchair in the movie had left a deep impression on me. I had to give it to Sister Pingping to use. As for his final words before he died, I had thought of them at the beginning of the story. I guarded those words for a whole year. I wanted to tell everyone that this eunuch, this damned eunuch, also had a gun. In reality, he had more guts than most men. At the end of the chapter, I could even shamelessly explain and explain again and again. Please understand me. I truly wanted everyone to feel my feelings. I hoped that Chen Pingping could still collect long-horned, long-tailed beauties in hell. Of course he could not go to heaven. I spoke of whoever I thought of. That is why I am talking about the Minister of Revenue, Fan Jian. I have many apologies for him. Because there was too little space, I did not write clearly about his feelings and thoughts. However, compared to Prime Minister Lin Ruofu who guarded Wuzhou, he was more open-minded. The man who stayed in the brothel was actually closer to the role of an official than Chen Pingping. Thus, he was actually very pained. In the end, he could only float away and resign. He probably had hopes for the Qing kingdom, but he could only passively watch all of this happen. Because of Fan Xian, he had to do something he actually did not want to do. Did Fan Jian have any feelings for Yi Qingmei? Who knows? At least I don't know. At the time, I didn't write it, so I didn't think about it. To say there were no feelings would be a lie. As for whether it was between a man and a woman or between brother and sister, I still didn't think about it. However, the Fan clan helped Yi Qingmei preserve the only bloodline in this world and indirectly caused Fan Xian's arrival. This already explains a lot. Fan Xian's future generations will all have the surname Fan. Making the Fan family of Danzhou famous can be considered a small compensation. However, I have thought about Minister Fan's attitude toward Fan Xian. In reality, Fan Jian had always thought that if the emperor wanted his son back, he would probably force Ruoruo to marry Fan Xian. Don't forget, when Ruoruo was still very young and her health was very poor, this Count Sinan had sent his only daughter back to Danzhou. Later, he had secretly maintained the correspondence between Danzhou and Jingdou. Why was this? Unfortunately, in the end, Fan Xian returned to the Fan clan's ancestral hall. While Minister Fan was gratified, would he also feel a little disappointed? I always thought that many middle-aged men might have some kind of fantasy. They would have their own son or daughter marry another woman's son or daughter in order to satisfy their unfulfilled desires. Truly, many people would fantasize about forming this kind of relationship with their first love. Of course, there are also friends who would directly direct their strategic gazes toward the children of their first love. This is something I admire. Speaking of this, I suddenly thought of Crown Prince Jing Li Hongqing, so I mentioned Li Hongqing. As for the Crown Prince, I liked him very much. It seemed that I liked all the people who appeared in the epilogue so far. Was this not too unfair to Fan Xian? Perhaps it was because I felt that Fan Xian was like my son, so I habitually imitated Wu Zhu and used a stick to educate him? The reason I liked Li Hongqing was very simple. Back then, he and the second prince traveled together, but it was only for the sake of friendship. He was a bit naive, but he was bright enough. In the Li royal family, only the eldest prince and Hongqing might have slightly broken away from the natural gloominess of the royal family. Hongqing's bright and lively aura was even more brilliant. In the book review section there was a post that talked about this and I liked it very much. Li Hongqing went after Miss Fan. This kind of shameless dog spirit is worth most of us men to learn from. As for the friends who hoped that Miss Fan and her brother would be together, they could all imagine the female doctors after the age of 30. In any case, this was an open ending, an ending that did not offend anyone. This also proved what I said earlier. I really was that kind of person. The Crown Prince, the second prince, and the Great Prince did not say too much because the first two in the book had already dissected it before they died. There was nothing to say here. I just felt some sympathy for Li Qingqian. His luck was too bad. His fate was not good. His father was too strange. His father always thought that everyone in the world was like a cockroach like him. As for the second prince, it was just as he said. He worked hard to the end and found that he had become the biggest joke. What an absurd reality this was. In the world of the Qing kingdom, there were no real precious jade or fake precious jade. There were only two young people who were very similar. Because the paths of their lives were different, they gave birth to completely different fruits. The great prince wished that he would be filial to Lady Ning and Dongyi and unite well with the great princess, Wang Tong'er, and Ma Suosua. These three were not simple women. He wished that he could be like he was on the western Hu grasslands, undefeated in every battle. Of course, I thought this was an extravagant hope. This person, who had given Fan Xian the most crucial support at the most critical moment, could not hope that Fan Xian would continue to help him with family matters in the future. I had to talk about Yan Bingyun. I could only say, it was hard to say. This person was hard to say, so I had nothing to say. White-robed young master, who did he work hard for? It was fine as long as the girls continued to look at him. I truly had nothing to say. Wang Qinian could say something. He was very good at talking. The cold-faced clown's skill was not fully displayed because there was indeed not enough space. This story of over 3 million words seemed long, but there were too many people and things in it. However, as Fan Xian's most trusted person, the first leader of the Qinian unit, and the best supporting character in the world, he already had glory. Don't forget the keys, chests, and many secrets that no one in the world, including the Qing Emperor Qin Pingping, knew. While he couldn't sleep in the middle of the night, did he also feel excited? It was as if he had returned to the days when he was a great bandit at the border of the three countries. The name Wang Qinian was the idea of flying general. He had aimed at it a few years ago on the illusory sword and felt it was very good. When he wrote this story he used it. As for the three great grandmasters, it was truly impossible to say. Just as the Qing Emperor had said, they were monsters that should not exist in this world. With such monsters above all living things had to look up to them. Their necks would easily get sore, and the incidence of cervical spondylosis would decrease. However, the benefits were not obvious. If Ku He was not called Zhan Mingyue and was the great-uncle of the northern Qi royal family, if Dongyi was not Sigu Jian, and if Yi Luyun was not raised to be such a mischievous person, how much trouble would these three great grandmasters have caused? Standing above all living things, they probably wouldn't care about the lives and deaths of all living things. Fortunately, they had their identities and restraints. Thus they became 3 nuclear warheads. No one dared to throw them out first until the electromagnetic weapon the Qing Emperor had hidden for a long time suddenly moved on Dong Mountain. It directly injured Ku He and Sigu Jian's hearts full of confusion and made them unable to move again. Comparatively speaking, I like Sigu Jian more. The reason is simple. I've written more about him. The longer I've known him, the more I feel for him. However, it seems that Fan Xian is an exception. God, I'm so sorry. I'm starting to talk about him again. Other than 13th Wang, who else does a man need to talk about? It seems that there isn't because I am also sleepy. My mind is truly empty. What should I talk about 13th? In any case, he already has Yi Ling so I won't disturb him. Brother Valiant General is not as pretty as Lin Qingxia, and he doesn't have Zhou Xingxing to interrupt him. It's inevitable that he is lonely and bored. Fortunately, he has Yi Ling. I repeat, men and women are strange and wonderful things. Snapping my fingers, I thought of Brother Shadow. However, Brother Shadow is a shadow. He is floating behind us, coldly and expressionless as he looks at your computer screens. After talking about men, let's talk about women. First, I will talk about Fan Xian's women. They may not be his women, but in my position they are all his women. Everyone says there isn't enough drama, but women come. I put my hands together and smiled as I thought, I've endured it. I've truly endured it. There aren't many female characters in the year of the Qing dynasty who can truly leave a deep impression. This is something that can't be helped. War, revenge, and conspiracies will make women walk away. Only those women who don't need to walk away will continue to appear in front of us. Returning to the main topic, I will first talk about Lin Wan. Yes, Fan Xian's official wife, the illegitimate daughter of the eldest princess and Prime Minister Lin, the niece that the Qing Emperor dotes on dearly. Her nickname is Yi Chen, and her cheeks have baby fat. Yes, I wrote based on Lin Yi Chen. When I began writing the year of the Qing dynasty, I was madly in love with her, just like when I began writing The Vermilion Bird, I was madly in love with Zhang Liangying. Please don't use this to criticize me. I always thought that for a middle-aged man to have such a strong interest in variety entertainment and to be able to like one young woman after another on television proved that this middle-aged man was a very good fellow. For example, the narcissistic me. I also liked the character of Lin Wan, because I liked her, I cared. Thus, the meeting in the Qing temple and the plot to enter the room were all carefully thought out and written. Even the cumin wind by the lakeside was still something I liked. If I was allowed, I was even willing to write the year of the Qing dynasty into a romance novel. In reality, I really did want to write a romance novel like the one Shi and Yu Qing wrote. However, the subscriptions were slipping, the monthly votes were being chased, and the book review section was crying boredom. Big Brother was watching me and money was tempting me. Thus, Lin Wanner's appearances became fewer and fewer, and her sense of existence became weaker and weaker. In the story of the year of the Qing dynasty, she lived miserably in the cracks and passively accepted everything that was placed on her. This was a very sad thing, but no one could change any of this. I won't hide it from everyone. When I wrote about Jiangnan and Jinghua, I had tried hard for Lin Wanner's sense of existence, but I still failed. There was nothing I could do. At that time, I was truly a bit unhappy. Thus, I complained to the leader who thought I was sucking up to her. I said these words at this time because I truly felt sorry for Lin Wanner, so I bowed in apology. Chapter 773. The theme has been decided, and the name has been decided. It's still the same vulgar and cheap name, Spy. It's hard to say the specific content because I don't even know what category it is. But it's definitely not a rebirth, and it's definitely going to be something extremely old-fashioned. It's still the same, I only know how to write such things. The release date of the new book is set to be around the 27th of April. It's my fault for making everyone wait for so long. I originally wanted to start writing it on the 1st of April, but I still had something to do. I still had something to do on the 10th, and even today I still have something to do. Furthermore, it's all family matters, so I'm very sorry. Vermilion Bird has ended, and I've spent a long time in between. At that time, I said that I saw a life and death contract, a wedding, and the birth of a child. It was very stimulating. Now that 2 years have passed, I realize that life is still the same. I'm not pretending to be a petty bourgeoisie like many people say. It's really a midlife crisis and I need to hurry and earn money. Although I said I'm in a hurry to earn money, I still dragged it out for so long. What a lazy cat, but it's definitely a serious cat. So it seems that the matter of stockpiling manuscripts has nothing to do with me. On the 27th, my fingers started to type. I hope that everyone who has been waiting for so long will give me enough face and call out to me softly. I can't guarantee that the new book, Spy, will be good, but I can guarantee that I will try my best to write it well and seriously. I have confidence in it, and everyone has confidence in me too, because we're all narcissistic. Chapter 774. The faultless chapters of Qing Yunyan will continue to be updated on Qingdao Novel website. There will be no advertisements on the website, so please collect and recommend it to Qingdao Novel website. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.